Prince Charles on his elevation had very big shoes to fill.
There is no doubt that in the 21st century Australia should become a republic.
This is not my first rodeo, by which I mean the royal tour.
I don't think he's actually fitted into them very well at all. Probably because they're high heels.
It is absolutely ridiculous that we are shackled to the British monarchy, which is run by one family, observing one religion.
I, for one, am looking forward to seeing them.
I can see the sort of good and bad in both.
King Charles and Queen Camilla visit Australia this week, their first visit since ascending the throne. However, the perception of the royal family has shifted dramatically in recent years, from the death of the Queen, the fallout of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, to the demise of Prince Andrew. So, as Charles embarks on a slimmed-down tour of the country, is royal fever still running a high temperature down under?
I have covered royal tours to Australia since 1988, which is to say last century. That was Charles and Diana. Now you may remember it wasn't the tour where she had little William and they went to Ayers Rock, or Uluru as we now call it. It was the one where she and Charles did that amazing dance around the dance floor. He was swinging her around and everybody was saying how incredibly in love they were. Now, all these years later, he's coming back. Diana has departed the stage.
My king! Not my king! Not my king! Not my king! Not my king!
I think the sort of royal fever is fading. It's still obviously a great tourist attraction, but only for the UK. I don't think anybody really thinks about it much here.
We don't believe in the divine right of kings anymore. There's absolutely no reason why we should have a monarchy in this day and age.
I think there's nothing incompatible with having respect for the royal family, and I certainly had enormous respect for Queen Elizabeth II, her devotion to her role, her integrity, and how she approached it, but also being a Republican. And that is actually the monarchy's view, is that if Australians want to become a republic, then they will support us to do that.
I mean, I think the royal family would have been so glad for the referendum passed.
I remember thinking at the time that if the question had been, should we become a republic on the death of Queen Elizabeth, I think it would have passed with a massive majority.
The constitutional monarchy is a system that seems to work extremely well. It's very stable. There are critics of it who say that they should not, or the royal family should not occupy the position of head of state, but of course we know that they don't. The head of states in Australia is the Governor-General. At the moment it's Sam Mostyn. You couldn't get a more Australian person. She's a Sydney Swans fan and she's as local as it's possible to be.
I do think support generally for the monarchy is in decline, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's a great movement or fervour for Australian republicanism. That, unfortunately, has not reached the levels it was in the 1990s.
I think King Charles's trajectory to the most loved royal was always going to be difficult because Queen Elizabeth II was so popular. And when she died, I think we really got a sense of how much she meant to people. Her stability and her solemnity and her sense of celebration, but also of seriousness, was what held her quite close to Australian hearts. Now, Charles has had a difficult time because people really did love Diana. They still remember those awful scenes of those young boys following Diana's coffin after she was killed in the car accident. I think it took a little bit of time for people to warm to Camilla because it was well known that Charles had had an extramarital relationship with Camilla. Who can still remember that amazing TV interview that Diana gave where she said,
"Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded."
Is he popular now? I think he's handled his own health challenges with a lot of courage, and I think that his relationship with Kate and William is something to be admired, particularly as Kate faces the cancer battles as well.
Marking the first time a British male head of state has visited Australia, some observers wonder whether this will be the last royal tour as debates around the country becoming a republic are reignited once again.
I mean, the word majesty, it's kind of there. It's antiquated and colourful, but still quite charming, I think. But that's that's an old man's romantic view of it.
Well, I think if Australia wants to be a republic, we have to seize our own destiny. And to do that, it requires everyday Australians to understand these ancient constitutional linkages that we have. But it also requires political leadership. And the truth is, we haven't had any strong political leadership on the issue of a republic since Paul Keating was Prime Minister in the 1990s. He's the only Prime Minister to formally put a model for an Australian republic to Parliament and tell the Queen it was the policy of his government that Australia becomes a republic. While I think the Australian Republican movement is simply invisible and doesn't know how to campaign for it. So I think this is a great tragedy for our nation.
I'm also a little concerned about how it would work if you had a Prime Minister and a President and they were both elected. Then you would have a clash of responsibilities and a clash of authority that I don't think our Constitution has yet worked out. Change might be a long time coming.
You know, there are good kings and bad kings, and they murder each other, and there are queens and great names, but that's almost the fun of a monarchy, if you like.